It really is a pleasure for me to be able to share my experiences and knowledge with you, and hopefully also sort of make you think about things, maybe at a grassroots level. That's how I coin it. So please, I'm going to challenge you, maybe make you think a little bit. I know that many of you are interested in this topic. You've signed up for the diversity agenda and accord, and for those of you who are just new to this space, thank you very much for coming along today, because I understand a lot of us have got Zoom fatigue, and so the novelty of staring at the screen for a period of time isn't as much as it used to be when, say, Saran did her amazing presentation. I'll just give you a very brief background. The reason that I'm so interested, particularly in the diversity agenda, is in fact that I graduated from Auckland University in about '92, and with a Bachelor of Property Administration. So that was actually back in the day when it was in the Architecture, Property and Planning School. And so I spent 3 years amongst the architects and next door to the engineers. I went on to work as a commercial property manager once the property industry had recovered from the '87 to '92 downturn, and worked for companies like Colliers International, Firestone Tire and Rubber Company, worked in the UK for a company called English Partnerships, working out the far east end of the Royal Docks. And my last property job was actually with Genesis Energy, one of our electricity retailers and generators. So certainly have worked across New Zealand over the years. But my speaking journey started when we actually were transferred to Singapore as a family with my husband's job. And I joined Toastmasters. I did a speech in front of the New Zealand Chamber of Commerce, but it was Toastmasters that really pushed me on to find out what it was like to speak as a minority, with a room full of 100 people that were looked and sounded very different to me. But it was really good for me. I ended up getting accepted as a job as a workshop presenter. So workshops are my real passion. I love being able to interact and talk with people. So I hope that I'll get some interaction on the chat box when you've all settled in. I started speech marks coaching in 2016, and my bylines quickly became the woman's public speaking coach, because I noticed around me so many qualified, experienced and really clever women were just simply unable to tell me what they did in business. So I niched into that market because I could see such a desperate need for it. And I have a keynote that I do present, which is specifically about helping women speak up. And today, with the diversity agenda, I've been asked to apply it and challenge you to think about how these issues I raise may be more applicable, not just to women, but other genders and also other minorities. So I hope that I can serve you in that. I'm aware that, of course, for many of you, most of you are at home, some of you are in your allocated lunch break. So I will just give you an idea of where we're going today. I'm going to cover why minorities would hold back. Why would they not speak up like other people? What level of assistance can we give them? So I'm looking at it at 3 levels: industry, business, and then individual assistance that you may think would be worthwhile. And how will this improve, and what benefits specifically public speaking, coaching and encouraging people to speak up will have. So I aim to be an hour, and I aim to answer questions as we go or after in a general Q&A session. So please do hang around if you can till the end. And as we've said, there's a chat box there for you, and Leanne's going to assist me with helping get those questions answered along the way. So I will actually just get straight into it and let you find out what we're going to be covering today. As I said, my area is helping women speak up, but there's many parallels. I'm not saying I'm representing the LGBTQ community or other minorities. I've merely researched and understood that what I've been saying about helping women speak up probably also applies to other minorities. And of course I do support them. I've got my t-shirt on today, Use Your Voice, which is one that's been put out by Levi's for the Gay Pride Week. So I'm a firm believer in helping all minorities be heard and use their voice. So I start off always by just covering off, in case you don't know, that big data analysis, even small data analysis, says that mixed gender teams outperform single gender teams. This is particularly, this slide itself was from a US survey by Articus about law firms, and they found that the mixed gender male-female assisted with better performances. The key here is that this isn't the only one. Goldman Sachs have done them, McKinsey, loads of different ones out there. I'm sure some of your industries have got them as well. But the best story I heard was Diane Edwards at her own Ports of Auckland. She's GM of People, Foresight and Innovation. And she tells the story about how early on in her role there, she had a look at the very traditional male-dominated role of stevedoring, which to you and me are the people that take the containers off the ships and onto the wharf and vice versa. They rescaled the job. They realised that as long as the woman could climb up the crane up to where they worked, they could do the job. And they looked around and networked out and had some women start in that job. Now, very soon, once they'd settled in, those women started to get up their performance ladders because they record the number of containers that everybody moves in a shift. And quickly they found that these women were getting really good. And Diane sort of jokes that, it wasn't just the numbers that they did in a shift. It was the little things like turning up to work on time or completing a shift or not having as many sick days. And so naturally what happened is that the men that had been there 10, 20 years didn't like the girls doing better than them and getting bonuses, and they lifted their game to match. So it's happening in New Zealand. Obviously New Zealand, we like to think of ourselves as far way ahead of the rest of the world in gender equality, but I think we probably know that we've got some way to go. So let's move on and have a look at why on earth a woman would need their own public speaking coach. I mean, people have asked this question, surely. We're all born talkers, aren't we? I know in my household with a son and then a daughter, the daughter almost forced her older brother to speak and chat. And it never surprised me after having a boy and a girl that research will say that women speak faster, 150 words per minute compared to men's 125 on average, if you like your detail. And their average telephone conversations are longer. I'm sure many people wouldn't debate that. But overall, they've figured out that men actually say about as many words a day as women. And in the last 6 weeks have taught me, with my husband being home from work, that I'd agree with that wholeheartedly. I can hear him all day, it feels like. But when we're in more formal situations, when women get put into a situation that might be an office or a meeting, or unfortunately even in the test situations that some people have manufactured to test this, women start to hold back and not be the little chatterboxes that they maybe were in their younger years. And in fact, there's even Victoria University research that agrees that in public meetings, even when men are a smaller proportion than women in the public meeting, they'll still answer far more questions and ask far more questions. And I got this pointed out to me a long time ago, in about 88, when I was at university, Bachelor of Property Administration, and the lecturer at the said, I noticed that there are certain women that are asking and answering more questions. The ones that are doing that seem to be the ones that went to the all-girls schools, and I'd really like all of you to participate. Well, there was giggles from the men, and there were some pretty annoyed looking looks from a lot of the other women in the class, and I just shrank down into my seat because I was one of the ones that had always asked and answered questions, and I was one of the ones that had gone to an all-girls high school. But they didn't realize it, and it's not necessarily something that keeps going on as much as it was obvious that year, my university lecturer and now professor of the department tells me. But the problem is that women become, or little girls start to be seen and not heard. And there's, again, bodies of research that say that girls in mixed gender primary schools are often praised for being the, the quiet girls that sit up nicely, put their hand up. Please, I'll answer the question, as the boys shout it out. Oh, so they learn that they get praised for being quiet and not speaking up or interrupting. And sometimes a lot of the boys just don't care, really. Now, I know this is sounding a little bit like it's a mass generalization. I certainly hope it doesn't continue or isn't continuing as much as it used to, but I have had teachers admit to me, and I have had also parents admit to me that they love it when their girls are playing quietly. So these things happen. Sometimes we lower our own expectations as girls. Sometimes we stop being talkative. And of course I start to think, well, if this is happening just with the females, then is it happening for minorities? And undoubtedly people have said, particularly if they are starting to discover their sexuality and as being lesbian or gay, that the bullying that happens at school and high school starts to really make them try and shrink away and be seen maybe, but not heard. And some people grow up with cultural expectations. They are still drummed into them that they are a child and shouldn't be spoken to, shouldn't speak unless been spoken to. They are a child, therefore they will be quiet at the dinner table. Maybe they don't see women leading their culture or their religion, so they don't see it as something that they should be doing. I guess really my emphasis here is that a lot of people have these internalized messages well before they reach the workforce. And I would like to just bring to you a video that I have watched many times and others will have seen possibly. It's called, I call it Like a Girl. It's by Procter and Gamble. And it's a beautiful video. And there's a series of them. I'll be talking over it a little bit. They record these people, and this is what they're introducing now. Can you just tell me what it looks like to run like a girl? And just the first reaction, and there's hers. And they'll go through that. There they are. Oh, this is what it looks like to run like a girl. What about throw like a girl?
Show me what it looks like to fight
and
like
then
a girl.
Through all of this, they start to say, oh gosh, wow, where did that happen? You see, we've internalized as girls maybe that at some stage we do something like a girl, but look at these little ones. They don't see the same thing as the older ones. They run like they are. They throw like they are. There she goes, bless her. So take a moment in your day or in the weekend to have a look at this. Google it up. It's sponsored by Procter and Gamble, but it is about like a girl.
So
when did it become an insult?
No.
And
insulted
I challenge you to ever, if you've ever used that phrase, to ever use it again. And I challenge you now to write a note to yourself, like a girl as an insult must be eliminated from our language. So we'll move on. Thanks, Leanne, to the next slide. We adjust because of messages that we receive, and we often do that in our 20s, because if we've had the benefit of being at, say, university, like engineers and architects do, and myself, and law, this is an issue as well. We have school and university results to reassure us that we're absolutely as good as, in male female terms, as all the boys. And I'm sure this could apply to many other people that we know. We've got exam results that say that we're an A student, right? So obviously we're as good. But then we come into the workforce and we find out that possibly it's not just the the work that we produce that's important. It's actually a lot of other things that make up how good we are at our job. And it's really important if you do have women in their 20s to really sort of keep an eye on, are they holding back? Are they adjusting their attitudes to fit with others in the work, in the business? Did you think you were employing someone that was going to be outspoken and noticed that they're not speaking up in the meetings? Why are they adjusting? Why are they becoming quieter? Why are they becoming a shrinking violet? Now, I'm sure that if you look and sound different from all your colleagues, and I know this from experience, it also that it takes a lot of courage to speak up and be heard. And I know from speaking to a transgender woman, she said, I'm very tall and very wide, and I stand out like a sore thumb. So I try to speak really quietly, and I'm sure that can apply to many other people. I heard a tragic story of a woman saying that she'd done a lot of work as a planner for the council when she was there. She asked her male colleague, who was equivalent, to peer review it. He took it to the meeting, claimed it as his own, and she didn't even have the courage just to call him out on it. She just sort of looked around and didn't think that anyone would support her. And unfortunately, her solution was to leave. But luckily, she was in my workshop when she was saying that this was happening. These things happen. They're not necessarily something that's happened in your own business. They might have happened when the person was a child. It might be something that's happened as a teenager. And it might be ongoing, and it creates a real sense of imposter syndrome. Now, again, I'm not the authority on imposter syndrome. I have certainly experienced it and still frequently do to some extent. But it's a crippling sense of self-doubt, particularly when we face challenges. It's a nagging feeling that you just maybe don't deserve that praise. And the way that we deal with it is that we just question ourselves. Now, it is statistically more common in women than in men, but it's also far more common if the person is a minority. So particularly if they're a racial minority. That person that could be very loud and boisterous in their own family or maybe within their own community suddenly becomes very quiet and doesn't see other people like them, so never really sure whether they belong. They will underestimate themselves. Fear of failure is overwhelming, of course. And the things that might try and cover this up, imposter syndrome, and becoming very quiet, is things where people might say, oh, it was lady luck, it was all good luck. When it wasn't, it was hard work. If you notice someone saying, oh, it was a team effort. Look, if it wasn't a team effort and it was that person's hard work and determination, call them out on it. I challenge you, call them out and say, hey, no, it wasn't a team effort. That was your effort. So again, have a think about it. Is there someone in your business, or is this something that you're doing? Are you sort of having a bit of imposter syndrome where you're giving credit to people or that awful woman lady luck when in fact it's your hard work? Now, If you're really interested in imposter syndrome, I'm going to actually do a shout out and referral to Jess Stewart, who's written books on it. Go to her website, and she's got resources and also can really help with this area of imposter syndrome. Role models are a really important part of us throwing off our imposter syndrome, and that's why when we get to having some industry solutions, that we will actually see the benefit of them. So if you are not convinced, I think we have a problem. Houston, I think we have a problem. I'm pretty sure we actually do have a problem. I found this little picture. I mean, what an imposing bunch of men. I would challenge any person to get up in front of that audience and speak confidently, because they all look like they want you to fail. Now, I'm sure in your industry or in your business, people don't go to work in three-piece suits anymore. Maybe, you know, they're a group of men that have all got black polo shirts on, or high-vis jackets on. But if all those people look different to you, like they look to us, I think that you definitely feel like you're sticking out. And we start to pull back if we're not comfortable with sticking out. And some of us are even silenced by the sheer weight of being so different from everybody else. So have a look around your office and see whether this is a kind of, you've got a version of this, and put yourself in their shoes and think, wow, that could be quite intimidating, couldn't it? I could see how looking so different just by the color of your skin, or the fact that you've got different colored hair. That's what I had in Singapore. I was the only white person in competitions and in an audience. I had blonde hair. You know, I was standing out like a sore thumb and feeling really self-conscious, along with all the other nerves that came with speaking up. And of course, I never wanted to be labelled as someone that was sounding my own horn. I see down there, Elizabeth McKenzie said, oh my God, it's a Federated Farmers meeting. Yeah, I see people do have their version of that. That it is quite imposing, and it takes a lot of courage to stand and be the one person that looks really different. And that's why that minorities need more support, because it's really isolating when you don't have the security also of knowing that you will always be listened to. So let's move on. Women's general tendency to shy away from self-promotion, feel like they're bragging, is a career advancement barrier. You know, we've heard about the casual chat about, oh, she's so this or she's so that. I had it myself. I was telling someone about a lease negotiation I was doing, when they said to me, wow, you're really hard-ass. God, you're a tough one. And I thought, am I? And I ran it past my boyfriend at the time, who's now my husband, and he kind of laughed and said, no, no big deal. Why is that so hard going? And I had to think at the time, you know, is it because I'm a woman that they thought I was being tough? I thought it was quite reasonable. I was always looking for great solutions. But there seems to still be that lingering different version of what self-promotion is. And that's one of the problems that we're finding. If you haven't read it or seen it and you're interested, my old professor, my old lecturer, who's now the professor of the department, Professor Deborah Levy, along with Jane Horan and Raywin Hills, produced a report based on surveys of women in the commercial property sector in Auckland. A lot of interviewing went into this, and some really startling conclusions as well were produced, where the woman was saying, yeah, I had a male colleague, we were both up for wanting a promotion, and he was just, and I quote, noisier than me. He wasn't any better than me. He was just noisier. So I would encourage you also to have a look around and say, you know, is the noisy person, is the person that's being brash and louder getting the promotion or getting the opportunities? How can we make this a more even playing field as far as that goes? I'm going to give you the reference to this report at the end because I think it's really applicable, although it's focused on the commercial property industry, so leasing, sales, property management. I think there'll be some very much some similarities within the wider property industry. So let's look at minorities. How does this background of myself working with women in New Zealand, how does that relate? And I would invite you now really to if you can, get near the keyboard and see if you've got some additional ideas. As I said, I'm not actually advocating that I know all the minorities and their challenges, just that there's many parallels. So have a look at these and then see what you think. Obvious one, they feel intimidated. Whether you're the only female in a meeting with lots of men, whether you're the only Pacifica person in a whitewash, you're feeling intimidated. Our brains, our old brains, the ones that we've had since we were cavemen, are hardwired to look for similarities and look for differences. What looks like me, what sounds like me, what's different? I look really different. They're all looking at me. I don't like them all looking at me. It's very intimidating if the people that you're looking at don't look like you. If you're not used to it, that is. Now, there's another generalization, but probably fairly accurate. They're not speaking up because they don't fit the mold. They don't come with this whole everyone's like me kind of, they'll all listen to me assumption that particularly New Zealand males have been brought up with. And many of them, as I said, don't want to stand out. You know, they already physically stand out. They don't want to speak up because people are going to look at them. They want to shrink back and just blend into the background. Now, this is getting really specific. The next one, they're raised to be what we might say as Kiwis, as complicit, but they've learned they're humble and they're respectful. And humble and respectful are great traits and they really should be valued. However, particularly when it comes to something like health and safety, being humble and being respectful and not questioning your boss could be very dangerous. And I'm going to pull up an example that another training company has used, and I think it really illustrates that people in their respect for their managers and their bosses will often agree and say yes when they really don't understand. So they don't speak up and say, hey, that's not the way it should be done, or I don't agree, or I don't understand. The next one is cultural bias. So cultural bias when we're speaking is an absolute double whammy. And just to illustrate it before I get into the speaking side of it, we have cultural biases. We all, pretty much, I'd say 99.9% of us have them. Some of them we're aware of, some of them we aren't. Cultural bias would happen. I grew up in New Zealand. I ate sort of a New Zealand British diet of, you know, meat and 3 veg. But a real treat when I was growing up in the 70s and early 80s was to have Chinese takeaway or Chinese restaurant food. And so my cultural bias is to have what I grew up with every day, and then my other favorite food, which I've got to know a lot, which is Chinese food. So I have a bias towards Chinese food, if you like, very helpful when moving to Singapore. But if I put that in a speaking context, our cultural bias comes in with our mannerisms. I'll do that with, if you can imagine a quiet Japanese girl would be very still, and again, generalization, I know, as opposed to an Italian man that's using his hands when he speaks, you know, hence the joke, cut off an Italian's hands and they can't speak. So your cultural biases and your mannerisms and your body language, and we communicate a lot with our face and our hands when we're speaking. We also have sentence structure and speaking patterns, which are very, very much a part of the way that our language is structured. A lot of confusion occurred in my house when we lived in Singapore because the Filipinos don't have a different word for he and she. So we would be talking about my son, but she'd suddenly come into the conversation and she was doing this. And I'd be going, just a minute, weren't we talking about him? So these little funny nuances that when you start to understand them and why they happen can help communication and the yes and the no. So it's very stressful for people we think of that possibly English is their second language, but you may well find that English is actually their third or fourth language. I know Indian people who speak, and same with Chinese, that speak 2 or 3 of their native languages, Chinese or Indian, and English is actually more like 3rd or 4th on the list. And it's very stressful when you speak a different language. And quickly you might find that you speak too fast or you speak too slow, so you don't speak up at all. So have a think about, is there someone in your business that's like that? And see whether that comes into play. I'm going to answer a couple of questions very, very soon because I'm just going to touch on 2 others. Obviously, some people are physically overlooked. I've had this question from an engineering student who was very petite. She said, I physically get overlooked because I'm so short. I also understand that as an issue. Also, if you're in a wheelchair, that you can be literally looked over the top of. And then, of course, there's something like that I've touched on with the language difficulties. If at home you're speaking English around the dinner table, then your conversational English is very strong. If at home you speak a different language, then your conversational English, which is the basis of the language you bring to the office, which is the foundation of the language that you may use with speaking to a larger group, then it's not as strong. So I'm going to a question now. There's a Ngāi Tahu woman, one of our committees, that doesn't say anything. Yeah, because they're not permitted to speak on more formal occasions. I was, thank you for raising that, Elizabeth. How do you deal with the tradition that requires female silence on one hand and find empower the woman? Great question. That is exactly what I have really been passionate about helping women do, because they quickly find out from my experience that they are great orators. If they are given the chance. Another question has been, would you suggest we talk English at home? Yes, I would. If your goal is to improve your conversational English and you're allowed to, I would suggest that you have it, maybe it's not all the time, it's not as you're running to get ready for work or something, but maybe when you sit down around the dining table, if you do that, and practice that to help increase your speed, introduce new words. Oh, I heard this great word today. Have you ever heard of that? Use this and discuss these different words. Just these little things will help people become more confident at speaking to their colleagues and speaking up at meetings. I'm just having a double check through any of the questions. Yeah, so people in the chat box are agreeing that these are issues. So please take a screenshot if you want of that, write them down, have a think about whether anybody in your office is like that. Is any of this issues that you're facing in some capacity? As I said, I haven't surveyed people, but these were the ones that popped into my head when I had a look at this. So if there's anything else, I have a question here, but you're Asian, and because you're Asian, and in quotation marks, and other minority representation sentences like that should be eliminated. Do you agree? I agree. I totally agree with that. I think potentially those are very lazy ways of saying something, and they should also be on the list potentially around your industry, around your office, that are things that shouldn't be said. Yeah, unless it's, but you're Asian, so you eat more rice, or something like that. I mean, yeah, things like that are not helpful at all, and they still go on. Unfortunately, New Zealand's had a real big, strong wake-up call to the fact that these sorts of expressions are commonly used. We're going to add in one other little factor that holds people speaking back, and it's, well, it's unique to us, I think. Certainly isn't shared with our neighbours across the ditch, and that's our tall poppy syndrome. So for those of you that are less familiar with this concept, tall poppy syndrome is something that almost in my lifetime seems to have come up and almost been celebrated, like, oh yeah, we're tall poppy. Well, tall poppy is the fact that we don't like our heroes to be anything other than humble, and hence, we loved Sir Edmund Hillary, and God, what a man! But he was so humble, and that's sort of how we like. We like our captains of the All Blacks. Sportsman's winner on the day. It was a game of two halves. We like them to be humble, and we indicate that. And so we have this concept that we do not like people to stand out. And I saw this upsettingly really strongly once when I was looking at the New Zealand Herald Online, and they were listing the nominations for Women of Influence Awards. Now, I'm not going to talk about which year it was and who they were. It was the comments that really indicated that tall poppy syndrome is alive and well. Comments like, I've never heard of any of these women. They can't be that influential. Or, oh, I've heard of her, but I wouldn't call her influential. She hasn't influenced my life. I mean, these are written comments from people. Don't know why we need these kind of awards. I mean, really? Do we need to spread this nastiness? Does it make you feel better that you put that so that the whole world could see that comment? We need people of minority, our women, our other people, to be okay and to be able to be rewarded for what they've done, to be comfortable with self-promoting and taking credit for the work that they've done. And I know, particularly for younger people, it seems like we haven't come far enough. But for those of you that are like me, that are sort of nudging half a century, we can look back and say, well, we've done quite a bit. When I was a little girl, Philip Sherry was the newsreader, and he was accompanied by another man. And, well, that was the only TV station, to be honest, so there wasn't much latitude for that. And then we had women like Angela Duordney and the original mother of the nation. Name escapes me all of a sudden. We had these women coming forward and reading the news, and it was a big deal that we had female newsreaders. Now, skip forward to now. One of the most well-respected anchors on CNN, Anderson Cooper, is gay. Openly gay, not going to apologise for it. We've got our gorgeous divine Maddie McLean, who's not only reading the weather but also doing other bits on TV1. And look, those are just the people that spring to mind. So we are getting better. We are making progress, and we are allowing people to be who they are. But we're also got a bit of tall poppy syndrome left. And it's on a little level, and an office level, it can sound, unfortunately, a bit like this. Did you know that in an average meeting, men and women will speak over top of and interrupt women more than men? I challenge you to make this one of your observations and see whether it happens anywhere in your company, in your firm, and in your work life. Whether you're a male or a female, Do you have an inclination to interrupt a woman more than a man? Certainly know from my experience within my bubble talking to my next door neighbours who have contractors on site, quite happy to interrupt me, but would hang off every word that my husband said. So yeah, it does happen. And I challenge you, that's a micro change that you can make, a grassroots level solution, please do. I'm going to move on now to the tough stuff. Big common big picture solutions to diversity. This is industry stuff. We have targets and quotas. New Zealanders like quotas. We don't like government telling us exactly how many we have to do, but other countries do. And most of us have targets, genuine targets we're trying to reach. Of course, we have policies. Big companies in particular have policies and procedures that support the targets and that are really important. We'll have reports. So AGMs will report on the diversity inclusion now. But if you don't have to put out an annual report or have an AGM, perhaps you could do that if you're not already doing it within your company. Have a report that says, this is how we've been going. Make it people aware of it. Celebrate your successes with it. And then, of course, with speaking, there's conferences. I know the property industry, the Property Council has said they have a 40-40-10 diversity aim, and I think that's fantastic. But if you are, if you're a male and you're invited on a panel, I challenge you now to ask who else is on the panel. And if it's not looking diverse, look at your own company and maybe the next rung down of management and say, do you know what? I want this person to speak on our behalf because that would help with the diversity on that panel. So take that opportunity. I was giving the male-female version of this keynote at a conference last year. And afterwards, it was sat down beside the managing director of a major, large speakers bureau. And she said to me, oh yeah, we get people asking for women all the time for their conferences. Oh, I spend so much time convincing them that actually I've got a man that's better and that he would be better. Let's just say the conversation ended there. Luckily for her, I'm polite enough to bite my tongue and not call her out on it, but I was certainly really unimpressed. I mean, here's an option. If that company can't provide someone of minority or can't provide a female on that topic, keep looking. I know you'll find them. But also, if you're being asked and you think actually this needs to be more diverse and you're the male or you're the female that's always asked, because this could be flipped around in some professions, then how about find someone and help them be the speaker at that next conference? Another one is awards. I've said this before. I absolutely support things like the Women in Influence and Women in fill in the industry name awards, but I sincerely hope that when my little 11-year-old is in the workforce, she'll look back and go, why did you have those, Mummy? Why did you need those? I'll say, oh, well, let me tell you about what it used to be like. So at the moment, I think they're really important. I know from speaking to Saran Dixon last week that she said, you know, awards for minorities are really big in the UK and also the US because they have the numbers. So perhaps your challenge as a company is actually to support some of those and actually sponsor an award. And finally, also is women's groups. The little photo there is me at the Woman in Property, but I know there's Women in Engineering, Women in Architecture, Women in Infrastructure. Shout outs to all of you for those that are involved in those. At the moment, they're really still needed because we are minorities in that workforce. And the thing is that to get a woman in construction, woman in trades, whoop. The thing is that you have, once you get gender diversity, it's like that's the tipping point. Once you can get that male-female diversity going, you can then get other minorities. Like I said, with the newsreaders, the woman can sort of spearhead the charge, if you like, and then more diversity can come in. And maybe from these groups, we will have more diversity as far as Māori and Pacific Islander in fill in the gap. But I'm not representative of those, but I hope that there is a appetite for that to be in our industries for as long as we need them, because as I said, I'm truly hoping they won't be needed for long. So workplaces, let's talk about what you can do in your workplace and then move on to personal ones. Good management. All very well and good, the CEO wanting to have a diverse and inclusive workplace, but is every level of management, every manager on board? Are you having the courageous conversations? Are you understanding them? And are you listening? Are you really listening to the difficulties that they've got? Another big thing that came out of the Women in Commercial Property report was the importance of having an approachable HR. Now, I used to be part of corporate services at Genesis Energy, and HR was one of the teams. And we used to all look at who was going into the HR department. What would they be doing? Oh, wonder what's up. So it's got to be a way that's approachable to the staff, and that they can solve the issues that are going on. It might have to be that you have a contractor, and again, one that listens really well. Respectful in and outside work hours. Sorry to bang on about this again, but again, this report said a lot of the things that happen to women, and I'm sure it happens to minorities, that cause them not to speak up, cause them to pull back, happen outside the office hours. Now, my husband has a policy of nothing good happens after midnight, so don't bring me a receipt from a bar after that time. And it's common in the property industry that people are out socializing, entertaining clients, but really enforce those policies. It's not what goes on tour stays on tour. What happens at the bar stays at the bar. If it is work, the same good behavior is required after hours. Encourage your people to go to the support networks, the woman in fill in the blank, or something else where they will feel supported and encouraged. Let them go along. I'll let you into a secret. We trade who's good and who's bad in this area at these sorts of events. We know which companies are doing well. We talk about the companies that are doing well. Make sure they're included in all discussions. Surely people don't get left out because they're a female. Yes, it's been known to happen. Oh, surely they didn't get left out because fill in the blank, whatever reason. Yeah, it happens. So make sure, without doubt, that everybody that should be included is included. That meeting should not go ahead if they haven't been included. And then, of course, patience with language and approaches. As I said, a lot of cultures actually will say yes, I understand, and they don't really. So I want to do a shout out later on to Upskills New Zealand, who are doing great work in this area with their clients. So public speaking. Why would public speaking be a soft skill that you'd want to encourage your minority staff members? Well, it's a grassroots solution that I've seen really helps with women, and I absolutely believe it'll help with your other minorities. You see, when you learn to develop public speaking skills, you also get on a self-confidence cycle. You learn that sometimes you're going to fail, but it doesn't matter. You'll have another opportunity. Next time you do a speech in your public speaking course, you'll have another go and you'll get better that time. So you have this ability to build up your confidence and start to get better. It happened for me at Toastmasters. I've watched it happen with hundreds of other people at Toastmasters and also other public speaking courses. I developed this just to so you understand that we're all born with public speaking skills. Everyday discussions, we've all nailed that. Everyday discussions are the absolute foundation building block of being a great public speaker. We practice them every day with introductions, answering questions. But some of us are not really willing to do short speeches, talk about our business, or even stand up and thank someone. But leadership, and this is what we're aiming for, not only to have people that are graduates, but stay in the industry and become leaders. Leaders need to be doing step 4 and step 5. Presentations, client pitches, being put forward for conferences, run a workshop within your business. And this is where you really want to be encouraging people to go on that journey through the steps and become more confident with their speaking. And just in case you're wondering, step 6 is for strange people like myself that like doing keynotes and speaking in front of a larger audience. I point out, and by all means take a screenshot of this if you've got someone that doesn't like to speak up or doesn't like public speaking. Most of us start off feeling very reluctant. And so we have what's called the comfort versus consciousness. And we start off being very consciously uncomfortable speaking up. We move into, with more speeches and over time, consciously comfortable. So we know that we're okay, but we're still very self-conscious. And then we move into being unconsciously uncomfortable. So we're just kind of natural. Now, many leaders will be in that area. You put them in front of a huge audience and they'll start to become uncomfortable. But my point is, if you start people with just the dinner room chat, the chat around the meeting room, the team chat, let someone lead, someone different lead the meeting, give them a chance to speak up a little bit more. Then you can move them through this feeling more comfortable and more listened to. Just checking the chat box. Some people are big on the quotas. That's interesting. I didn't expect that. Okay, that's good to hear. Hey, so how does public speaking help an individual? Well, they get comfortable hearing their own voice. No, I'm not kidding. Most of us don't like hearing ourselves when we're recorded, me included. But if you've never really spoken up in a meeting or participated in a conversation, maybe just hearing your own voice through public speaking training will be helpful. You start to learn through good public speaking training, you're confident, you can stay calm. You'll learn to be more succinct, you'll learn to edit and get better at saying something quickly and not waffle. Good public speaking training is going to help you with answering questions. And a good course will have a section on that, I believe. You get more comfortable with bigger rooms and different settings and know that just because you're not facing that way this week, that you don't need to get nervous. You can stand over there or sit down or be on a bigger stage. And of course, you'll become more visible and be more comfortable with being visible. So what do? You identify your talent and their challenges, evaluate them, maybe by the speech coach. I actually worked with someone who was going on a course and I was retained to help her pluck up the courage to go on the course. You might execute a training plan. Training plans are great, but just have them accountable and with a time frame. People will try and get out of writing and delivering speeches on a public speaking course, and make sure they've got some role models and opportunities to speak. Develop that public speaking skills all the time. So courses. Toastmasters. As I said, I've been a Toastmaster for years. I'm sure many of you have been as well. It's great. I come with 2 caveats. 1, it's run by volunteers and it's run by people that are generally not trained in public speaking. So you will potentially learn bad habits. I went on a course, which is actually an interview, and they said, "You're good, Diana, but you sound like a Toastmaster." I was like, "I'm sorry, I'm what? I sound like a Toastmaster?" Ooh. So watch out for that. Be aware that not all Toastmasters courses clubs are equal. Look for a good one. Try not to pick up bad habits, and make sure that there's some people that are much better than you. The other big caveat, of course, it's an at your own pace course. So if you send someone to join Toastmasters, there's possibly no real drive for them to finish. The next one would be something that I've been big on with my helping women, is that there are now female only courses. Toastmasters can't do that. They can't discriminate based on gender, race or religion, which is obviously a good thing, but there is a demand for women only public speaking courses. This is my one. There are other ones available. How do you address the common belief, is a question, that affirmative action means the women are only getting certain jobs because of a quota? Ah, yes. Let's take that to the end, if you don't mind. This is an architect. English was her second language, and she was on my course saying that getting better at public speaking gave her confidence to speak up in professional meetings. Yeah, she was shy because she wasn't sure that her English was good enough. She felt easier just speaking to CEOs, the clients, by going through our course, that she says so. You can do workshops. This is just an advert for one that I ran, a full day that had a lot of emphasis on PowerPoint, but with audience alive. Again, just have a real good look at what they're doing. That's my woman in engineering. What is in the course content? What is included? Is it right for you in what you need or what they need if you're sending people on them? I've broken up one of my courses to 2-hour slots. So I go back and forth to Collier's and have their staff for 2 hours, because that's as long as they'll want to be in the room for. They'll be out answering emails and phone calls. This is a course I did with refugees. So really think about what suits you. If you don't think that they want to do a Toastmasters public course, have a look at what else is on offer. There are loads out there, and not all created equal, obviously. Maybe you just want to suggest or have a look at online courses, 5,404 of them with Udemy alone. There's lots of them. Again, they're at your own pace. The bottom one on the screen there, I never finished. So that's the other problem with some of the online courses. There's books, of course. I've got a couple of those books. I've got about 10 or 15 others, of course, for research. But again, you need to have a look at what suits yours best. Obviously, I would think my book would suit New Zealand market best. This is helping people speak up in meetings and speak up every day and develop the basics of their public speaking courses, public speaking skills, sorry, so that they can just improve on a daily basis. And then there's one-on-one coaching. This might be needed. People are a bit shy about one-on-one coaching, so be aware of that. I've coached that's Jess Quinn. She was Dancing with the Stars. She she's missing part of her leg from cancer. I helped her with her keynotes. Pip Bunk there in her high-vis jacket for women in trades, and some other women that I've coached over the past few years. They get a lot out of it. In fact, the one with the red shirt, the lady speaking there, I actually helped with the Property Institute, Property Council put on a whole event so that she could put her new skills to good use. So there are ways to do it. Pip, bless her, great shout out, really helped her self-confidence. In fact, so much so, I went to a conference and she was on the panel. So, it does open up new opportunities and help. But this is my thing. Practice every day, whether you're in a meeting, whether you're at a networking event, whether you're just being in conversation at the water cooler. Every day you can practice public speaking skills, your facial expressions, your vocal variety, your hand gestures. All of the basics can come more naturally to you if you practice every day. That is some of the things I really want you to really help people. Just practice at that micro level every day. I want you to speak up in the team meeting and have something to say every meeting, for example. So I'm sorry, we're a little bit pushing through to the last of this. We want our women to be speaking up, and we also want our minorities to be speaking up. We need to have a diverse range of thought and ideas, but the basics of having that is in the office. So we need to make sure that we get that office situation right. so that people are having a chance to speak up in the office, that they are feeling courageous enough and that they will know that they will be listened to and heard and valued. It doesn't come as an automatic right to many people. So create an environment where everyone gets a chance to speak up, maybe with a little bit of a push, and they're listened to and heard. It will be very beneficial because you will then retain staff more. They'll feel valued. They might need some help, but make it a multi-pronged approach to getting your minority people to speak up. A supportive culture, maybe some additional training, a little bit of encouragement, and maybe you'll be able to provide the role models for your business and for your industry. I truly believe that helping at that grassroots level of making sure people know that they're valued, that they'll be listened to, that they'll be given the time to speak up, even at the most micro levels, will help us become more diverse and inclusive within our businesses and with our industries. And I invite you, if you're there, to put in any other comments, any other suggestions. I'm always open to that. We have some other ideas about what's helped or what you see as being something that you would like to see happen. I mentioned a couple of times the reference there. That was the reference for the Women in Commercial Property report from the Department of Property Auckland Business School. And that is my references. I'm more than happy to take questions offline by email or phone, of course. And if you are interested in helping someone but don't know where to start, want them to have something that's New Zealand based that could help them become more vocal, speak up, participate in meetings, then something like my book, Anyone Can Speak Confidently, could help with that.